What if your entire people were sentenced to death and you were the only one who could stop it? But speaking up would cost you everything. Your position, your safety, possibly your life. This is the story of Esther, an orphan girl who became a queen, a woman who had to choose between her comfort and her courage. A story that asks the question, what if you're in your position for such a time as this? This isn't just ancient history. This is your story too. Our story begins with a party. Not just any party, a 180-day celebration thrown by King Xerxes, ruler of the most powerful empire on earth. 127 provinces, stretching from India to Ethiopia. And the king wanted everyone to see his wealth, his power, and his most prized possession, his beautiful wife, Queen Vashti. "Bring out the queen," he commanded. "Let everyone see how beautiful she is." But Queen Vashti did something unthinkable in ancient Persia. She said no. The king's advisors went into crisis mode. If the queen can defy the king, every woman in the empire will start defying their husbands. So Vashti was banished, stripped of her crown, erased, and now the empire needed a new queen. Young virgins were gathered from across the empire, not volunteers, but conscripted, ripped from their homes, given no choice. Among them was a Jewish orphan girl named Hadassah. You know her as Esther. Esther had lost everything. Her parents were dead. She was being raised by her older cousin Mordecai in exile, in a land where being Jewish made you a target. And now she was being forced into the king's harem. Mordecai gave her one critical instruction: don't tell anyone you're Jewish, because in Persia, that secret could get you killed. For 12 months, these young women underwent beauty treatments. They were being groomed like products on a shelf. And then, one by one, they spent a single night with the king, one night to win a crown, or be forgotten forever. When Esther's turn came, she didn't try to manipulate. She didn't load herself with jewelry. She simply showed up as herself, and the king fell in love with her. The orphan girl became queen of the most powerful empire on earth. But she had no idea why God had placed her there. Not yet. God positions you before he reveals your purpose. Sometimes you don't understand why you're where you are until the moment you're needed most. Meanwhile, a man named Haman was climbing the political ladder. He became the king's right-hand man, promoted above all other nobles. And the king issued a command: everyone must bow when Haman passes. Everyone did, except one man. Mordecai, Esther's cousin, refused to bow. Not out of pride, not out of disrespect, but because bowing to Haman meant betraying his faith in God. Day after day, Mordecai stood while others bowed, and day after day, Haman's rage burned hotter. Finally, someone told Haman, that man is a Jew. And that's when Haman decided killing Mordecai wasn't enough. He would annihilate every Jew in the empire. Think about that. One man's refusal to bow triggered a genocide plot. Haman went to King Xerxes with a lie wrapped in flattery. There's a certain group of people scattered throughout your kingdom. They don't obey your laws. They're different, dangerous. Let me issue a decree to destroy them. The king, not even asking which people Haman was talking about, handed over his signet ring. Do with them as you please. Just like that. A stroke of a pen, a seal in wax. Every Jewish man, woman, and child in 127 provinces was sentenced to death. The date was set, the 13th day of the 12th month. The Jews didn't know why. They hadn't done anything wrong. They just knew that in less than a year they would all be slaughtered. Mordecai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and wailed in the streets. And in the palace, behind golden walls and silk curtains, Queen Esther had no idea her people were about to be exterminated. Evil thrives when good people stay silent. Sometimes standing up costs you everything, but sitting down costs everyone else their lives. When Esther finally heard about the decree and that Mordecai was mourning at the palace gate, she sent him new clothes. But Mordecai sent back a message that shattered her world. Don't think that just because you're in the palace, you'll escape when all the other Jews are killed. Visuals. Esther's face draining of color, reality crashing in. She wasn't safe. Her crown couldn't protect her. Her secret wouldn't hold forever. If you remain silent now, relief will come from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And then came the words that would echo through history. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? For such a time as this. All those years of pain, the loss of her parents, being taken into the palace against her will, becoming queen. It was all leading to this moment. But there was a massive problem. No one, not even the queen, could approach the king without being summoned. If you walked into his throne room uninvited, the penalty was death, unless the king extended his golden scepter to you. Esther hadn't been called to see the king in 30 days. He might have lost interest. He might be angry if she showed up. She could die the moment she stepped through those doors. But Esther made a choice that defines true courage. Gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. And then I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And then she said the words that still give us chills. And if I perish, I perish. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified. It's saying if I perish, and walking forward anyway. Visuals, modern struggles, standing up at work, speaking truth, taking risks. Maybe you're facing a moment like this right now, a choice between your comfort and your conviction, between staying silent and speaking up, between playing it safe and risking everything for what's right. Esther's story says, the cost of silence might be greater than the risk of speaking. Before we see what happens when Esther walks into that throne room, I need to ask you something. Has this story grabbed you yet? Are you starting to see yourself in Esther's dilemma? If so, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Sacred Stories Retold. We bring ancient biblical stories to life because these aren't just old tales. They're timeless truths that speak directly to the battles you're facing today. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a "for such a time as this" moment? When did you have to choose courage over comfort? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. All right, let's find out if Esther survives her walk to the throne. 3 days of fasting, 3 days of prayer, 3 days of staring death in the face, and then Esther put on her royal robes and walked toward the throne room. Every step could be her last. She reached the entrance. Guards watched. Nobles whispered. And there sat King Xerxes on his throne, holding the power of life and death in his hand. The room went silent. Would he be angry? Would he call the guards? Would this be where her story ended? And then, the king extended the golden scepter. What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you. She had his attention. She had his favor. She had survived. But Esther was brilliant. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared. A banquet. Simple, elegant, non-threatening. The king agreed immediately. And Haman? Haman was thrilled. The queen wanted him at her private banquet. At the banquet, the king asked again, "What is your petition?" And Esther delayed. "Let the king and Haman come tomorrow to another banquet, then I will answer." Why wait? Because Esther understood something crucial. Timing matters. She was waiting for the perfect moment, and she was letting God set the stage. Wisdom knows when to speak and when to wait. Faith doesn't always mean rushing forward. Sometimes it means trusting God's timing. And while Esther waited, God was working behind the scenes. That night, Haman went home on top of the world. "I'm the only one invited to dine with the queen and king. Tomorrow I'm going back." But then his face darkened. "But all of this means nothing as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate." His wife and friends had a solution. Build a gallows 75 feet high. In the morning, ask the king to hang Mordecai on it. Haman loved it. He had the gallows built that very night. But while Haman was plotting murder, something strange was happening in the palace. The king couldn't sleep. This wasn't random. This was God moving chess pieces. The king called for the chronicles, the records of his reign, to be read to him. And that night, randomly, they read about an incident from years earlier. Mordecai had uncovered an assassination plot and saved the king's life. The king sat up. "What honor has Mordecai received for this?" "Nothing, Your Majesty." Nothing. The man who saved his life had never been rewarded. Just then, Haman arrived at dawn, eager to ask permission to hang Mordecai, But before Haman could speak, the king asked, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Haman's heart soared. Obviously, the king is talking about me, so he described the most extravagant honor imaginable. Let him wear the king's royal robe and ride the king's horse through the city, with a noble proclaiming, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." The king smiled. "Excellent! Go at once. Do this for Mordecai the Jew. Don't neglect anything you suggested." The gallows Haman built for Mordecai was still standing in his backyard, and now he had to parade Mordecai through the streets like a hero. The trap he set became the pit he fell into. Pride comes before a fall. The schemes we plot against others often become the snares that catch us. Haman led Mordecai through the city, shouting honors he designed for himself, humiliated with every word. Then he rushed home, covered his head in grief, and before he could even process what happened, the king's servants arrived. Time for the queen's banquet. The wine was poured, the atmosphere perfect. And then the king asked for the third time, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." This was it. Everything had been building to this moment. Esther looked the king in the eyes and said, "If I have found favor with you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people, this is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." The king's face went from confusion to fury. "Who is he? Where is he, the man who dared to do such a thing?" Esther pointed across the table. "An adversary and enemy. This vile Haman." Haman's face turned white. The king stormed out into the garden, too furious to speak. Haman knew he was finished. So he fell on Esther's couch, begging for his life. And that's when the king walked back in. He saw Haman on Esther's couch and roared, "Will he even assault the queen in my presence, in my own house?" The servants immediately covered Haman's face, the sign of a condemned man. Then a eunuch spoke up. "There's a gallows 75 feet high at Haman's house. He made it for Mordecai." The king's response was ice cold. "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the very gallows he'd built for Mordecai. The executioner became the executed. The hunter became the hunted. God sees injustice, and in his time he settles accounts. What you sow, you will reap. Haman was dead. Justice was served. But there was still a massive problem. The decree to destroy the Jews was still in effect. Persian law was irreversible. Once sealed with the king's ring, not even the king himself could cancel it. The massacre was still scheduled. The countdown was still ticking. Esther fell at the king's feet, weeping, begging him to stop Haman's evil plan. The king extended his scepter again and said, "I can't revoke the first decree, but write another decree in my name, seal it with my ring." So they issued a new decree. The Jews had the right to defend themselves. When the day came, the 13th of Adar, the Jews didn't have to die like sheep. They could fight back. And when that day arrived, the Jews didn't just survive. They triumphed. The enemies who came to destroy them were defeated. But the Jews took no plunder. They weren't fighting for gain. They were fighting for their lives. The day of mourning became a day of celebration. The Jews established a festival called Purim to remember how God turned their sorrow into joy, their death sentence into deliverance. What the enemy means for evil, God can turn for good. Your darkest valley can become your greatest testimony. Here's something stunning about the book of Esther. God's name is never mentioned, not once. No miracles, no burning bushes, no parted seas, no angels, just coincidences. A sleepless night, a random page in the Chronicles, a beauty pageant that put a Jewish orphan on the throne, a cousin who refused to bow, a queen who found courage. Every piece fell into place. Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And when you step back, you see God's fingerprints everywhere. God is at work even when you can't see him. His silence doesn't mean his absence. He's moving behind the scenes, positioning, preparing, orchestrating. Maybe you're in a season where God feels distant, where heaven seems silent, where you're wondering if he even sees your struggle. Esther's story says, he's there, working, watching, weaving everything together for your good. You might not see it yet, but one day you'll look back and realize every closed door was protection, every delay was preparation, Every coincidence was divine orchestration. Esther went from orphan to queen, from invisible to influential, from terrified to triumphant. And her story asks you one question. What if you're in your position for such a time as this? What if that difficult job is your mission field? What if that painful season is your preparation? What if your voice, the one you've been too afraid to use, is exactly what someone needs to hear? The God who positioned Esther in a palace is the same God who positioned you where you are. The God who gave her courage in the throne room will give you courage in your crisis. You are not here by accident. You are here for such a time as this. So speak up. Step forward. Take the risk. If you perish, you perish. But what if you don't? What if you're the answer someone's been praying for? If this story encouraged you, share it with someone who needs courage today. Hit that subscribe button and join our Sacred Stories Retold community. Comment below, when have you had to choose courage over comfort? What was your for such a time as this moment? Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change your life. Remember, you were positioned with purpose. You were placed with intention. You are here for such a time as this. Until next time, may you walk in courage, knowing that the God who sees you has already prepared your path.